What's up, y'all? Mo back with another episode of Premier Music Tribe. Given all the controversy that's been floating around these days with J. Cole versus Kendrick, and especially J. Cole taking shots at Kendrick's discography in the song 7 Minute Drill. I did want to take an opportunity to maybe put together a composition list of their albums and see kind of how they stack against each other. I think J. Cole took a chance with calling him out on his discography. We heard the line, your second one was put people to sleep, but they gassed it, right? Meaning to Pimp a Butterfly, which was critically acclaimed, kind of controversial in that sense. But also, people have been saying that about J. Cole throughout parts of his career as well, especially early on, where he kind of was like that sleepy, a little bit too thought-provoking sort of rapper, and not necessarily coming with the bars or the tone that people wanted to hear. So I figured, let's just stack them up, right? Why debate kind of ambiguously? Let's just make it very clear cut. This is including mixtapes as well. Yeah, we'll just see where it ends up. The first one here is the Kendrick Lamar EP, which is pretty old. I'm not gonna lie, I think this was 2009-ish, 2010-ish. And to be honest, I think it was like early in his career where, he was kind of just getting off the scene. He did have like moments of, fire, I feel like, on this album, but it wasn't necessarily memorable when you look back at his career, right? There are other pieces of work that maybe raised the bar a lot higher. So I'm just gonna kind of put this at because, like, for me personally, it didn't really do much, right? And again, I should set the tone that this is my own personal perspective. So if you disagree, let me know in the comments. Obviously we're all gonna have a difference of opinion, so I'm curious to hear. Happy to debate as well. But for me, that's not really starting off strong compared to some of these other options here. I think the next one is Overly Dedicated. That's Kendrick Lamar as well. This was also early in his career. And to be honest, I'd probably put that in the same boat. I know it doesn't look great kind of putting two albums of Kendrick's right in the category right away. But again, I think if not too many memorable songs off of this album that can really hit the same way these days. So I think another thing I consider is staying power as well as impact in the moment when they did release. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put that in the category. Next one is Section 80. Now Section 80 is, I think, a different sort of album, right? This is where I think it was technically a mixtape, maybe, if not an album. But this is where he really started to garner some attention, I feel. Coincidentally, High Power was on this album, and J. Cole actually produced that that beat. So this is an interesting kind of connection point between them. But this, for me, was solid. There were definitely a couple tracks on here that I remember. High Power and also ADHD that I felt like really had good staying power. Honestly, you could probably play those back to this day. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the good category. I don't think it was necessarily next level. It wasn't quite fire, but it was probably upper middle good. I'd put it there. Okay, now we're getting into the mix. Good Kid, Mad City. Honestly, not much to say here. This is an instant classic. I remember I went to a Kendrick Lamar concert when this album dropped, and it was unbelievable. It was amazing just hear all those songs live. You got Backseat Freestyle, you got Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe. Those were huge, colossal songs, I think, in different ways. One was a lot deeper in Backseat Freestyle, and then Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe definitely was just like that radio play, but also still could play off radio as well, just on your playlist. There's so many songs on this album. I mean, I could talk about it all day, but this is an instant classic for sure. Now to Pimp a Butterfly. And maybe this is where we'll have differing opinions because it is so controversial. I know it won a lot of attention. If I'm not mistaken, he won a Grammy for this album. And this was around the same time as well where he won a Pulitzer Prize as well. But I'm not going to lie, zero replay value for me. I remember when this dropped as well, it wasn't memorable. It didn't really hit the same for me. I think this was around the time where I started to feel like Kendrick was a bit too dense in his material, and it just didn't hit the same for me. So I'm going to go ahead and put this here, or an I feel like putting it in trash is just like a bit too disrespectful, to be honest. just given the notoriety that it got, critically acclaimed, and all the awards it won. So, but for me, it's just at most it's it's borderline trash, I'd say. This, I believe, is his Untitled Unmastered. I'm just going to go ahead and put that there right away. I mean, it already is kind of color-coded. It kind of goes without saying. But yeah, nah, I'm pretty sure that album had all the songs, like, numbered as well. Like, no one remembers any songs off that album, period. Okay, Damn, again, another classic, probably arguably his best piece of work, right up there with Good Kid, Mad City. I mean, you've got DNA, you've got Humble, you had the radio slaps, you had the thought-provoking songs as well, you had the narrative and cohesiveness in that album all the way through. I believe there was like some discussion around you can actually like listen to the song front to back and back to front and get a different takeaway from it. And it was about something to do with like his father getting set up for murder by his manager or something like that. It was kind of crazy. So again, just a lot to digest with this album, but at the same time had the songs that really slapped and were easy to digest. So definitely classic. Yeah, Mr. Morale and Big Steppers is not it for sure. I think arguably maybe his worst piece of work, if that's fair to say. I think he just took a lot of time off, and to be fair, I think he went through some life stuff, and obviously he's got a family now, and maybe this album was on the more personal side in that sense. But from my point of view, it didn't do anything at all. Very forgettable. So yeah, I'm just gonna throw that right in the trash. Okay, now we are at J. Cole. This is, I guess, a good point to pause and just see kind of where things stand with Kendrick's discography, in my opinion. So you've got 2 in the trash, 3 in you got 1 good, and then 2 classics. So it is definitely a bit skewed on the lower end here. But that being said, he still has those 2 classics. So let's see how J. Cole stacks up, in my point of view. And especially if it's a similar kind of skew, and how many, if any, he has in that classic category to try and compete with him. I think the first one here is J. Cole, The Come Up. So early days, but I still think, honestly, this mixtape has a lot of staying power, a lot of timeless songs on there. You could definitely hear the years and hear how old it is when you listen to it, just because he was so much younger. But I think the quality was there. Definitely a lot of songs I remember off of The Come Up, and I would definitely put this in, honestly, I'd probably put this in the fire category, to be honest. I think right up there with the warm-up. The Come Up is probably like lower fire, and then the warm-up is the upper fire for me. I remember the warm-up kind of took me through a lot of the college years, a lot of memorable tracks, kind of driving back home on my 5-hour trip back from college and just playing this on loop all day long. So I definitely would put them both in the fire category, the Come Up probably being lower fire, and then the warm-up being upper fire for me. Friday Night Lights. This is the one that should have been an album and had to be released as a mixtape, because I think Jay-Z was holding them back because they didn't have a quote-unquote radio single. But Friday Night Lights is an instant classic in my opinion. I remember clamoring for it to be on Spotify back in the day, and I was happy when they actually pulled it off. So honestly, quality mixtape / album. So many memorable moments and songs from this album, and I mean, if you're a fan of rap, you love this album for sure. Okay, J. Cole's first official album, Sideline Story. Not gonna lie, I mean, he was kind of like still early on, kind of all over the place with this album. Not really anything that I find myself going back to, but I do remember playing this quite a bit when it did drop. Not every song, but I remember he had a song with Missy Elliott. That was cool. Can't Get Enough with Trey Songz. It was kind of a bop for a while. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had a song with Miguel as well. So yeah, I think there's some bops here. I think he finally got that radio hit on here as well, which did its thing, but not the favorite J. Cole album. I'd probably put this Should it go to good? I'm like in between these two right here. Yeah, I mean, let's just be a little bit critical here. I think there's too many other quality albums. You don't want to flood it on the higher end unless it's really worthy. Truly Yours, I'd probably throw that in the trash, to be honest. Nothing really memorable there. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Okay, this is Born Sinner. Born Sinner is kind of a bop. This was his second album. This he had actually a feature with Kendrick on here as well, but Kendrick didn't actually lay a verse. He was on the chorus. But it was still a good track. He had a couple other bangers on here. He had a bonus track, 50 Cent. I really liked. I'm blanking on the name, but that was cool. So yeah, I put this in the good category. Okay, 2014 Forest Hills Drive, arguably his best album. It's definitely a classic, hands down. I love that album. I mean, front to back, cover to cover. I think maybe one skip, if that, just only if you're not in the mood. But the rest is just timeless music. Tale of Two Cities, I think, was like the most mind-blowing song I'd ever heard at the time. Amazing, flawless piece of work. Which album is this again? This is For Your Eyes Only, that's right. I remember he had Neighbors. That was an interesting song on there. The Neighbors Think I'm Selling Dope. The music video had like the SWAT team breaking in. So that song was cool. I didn't really care for songs like Folding Clothes, to be honest with you. This one is probably in the trash, to be honest. Yeah, not ideal, but it is what it is. Okay, KOD is one of those, I think, polarizing albums. Because this is where he kind of started to experiment a little bit, but it didn't really like do it for me. But I appreciate the effort. Like, he was trying to get out of his sleepy bag around this album. So he had songs like ATM, where he's like, count it up, count it up, count it up, count it. Kind of very different sort of track and tempo than what you're typically used to hearing. But he didn't lose the substance either. He still had a few songs on there that were kind of deep and thought-provoking. I did listen to this for a while. I did like the song with Kevin Hart as well. I think it was called Kevin's Heart, actually. That was a cool, like, artistic piece. So I feel like he took some chances on here. I believe he had that little pump diss on here too, which was awesome. And that garnered a lot of news in the media as well, especially with people like Corday, having a good rebuttal to that, which I think I really appreciated. So I'd actually put this in the good category for all of the things I mentioned. Okay, the final two here. The Off Season is, oof. I struggle to not put this in the classic, to be honest. I might just do that because this one was, I mean, when it dropped, it was like peak. Like, this is like a new prime that he's entered in. I think this is probably something that everyone can relate to. I don't know if I would put it above 2014 Forest Hills Drive for me, just because that one hit different and it's kind of nostalgic. Different works of art, I believe. But I could go back and forth. I mean, I think you can make the case for either. If you're just going to keep it at that, I think it's got to at least challenge for classic. Yeah, there's so much I could say about that album, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. But I think flawless piece of work, flawless pen work. This is where he really started to challenge himself and push himself to new heights, and I just really appreciate that. Okay, last but not least, Might Delete Later. This is very new. It dropped as of the recording of this about 4 days ago. To be fair, I've only listened through it once, so it is, take it with a grain of salt sort of ranking. It's not a classic, in my opinion. Maybe you gotta sit with it sort of thing, but I already know there's a couple songs on there that, aren't gonna have staying power for me. I appreciate songs like Pie, especially his verse. I think he destroyed that verse and is arguably potentially a perfect verse, which is saying a lot. But, I didn't really care too much for Daylight and Absol. I think it was just a bit too dense and difficult to digest. And, yeah, I wasn't necessarily in that headspace for it. And usually not really, to be fair. I think there's depth in that. I think there's, like, biblical depth. And I feel like that's the time they were on. And I don't really find myself kind of in that space too often. But then there's bops as well. I mean, Crocodile Tears, that was fire. You got Stealth Mode. That was awesome. I like the beat. That was smooth. You see him experimenting with people like Central C, which is nice to see. Cameron back on there with a throwback Dipset beat. So there was a lot of fun moments on there for sure. I think a lot of timeless bars as well. So that being said, I'd probably put that in the fire category. So I think this is it. This is the list. It's kind of interestingly balanced now. You know, previously it was heavily skewed down at the bottom. We now kind of seem to be a little bit more evened out. So if we go row by row, starting at the trash category, we've got it pretty even right there. Right? We got 2 works of art by Kendrick and 2 by J. Cole. Again, try to removing bias and trying to be very honest just from my own personal taste. So that one's kind of a flush. You go to the category, and Kendrick kind of takes the cake there, 3-1. It doesn't necessarily mean he lost the war. It's just kind of that's how the category ended up. Good category, you've got J. Cole with 2 versus Kendrick's 1. So that's already kind of 2-0 in terms of categories to J. Cole. And then fire is just J. Cole, and then classic is 3-2 J. Cole. So, you know, it could be a function of just volume as well, right? Like J. Cole's just released more works than Kendrick has, and so that's kind of the disadvantage you put yourself at. But I think you also should consider that, right? Because consistency matters in this game. You look at someone like Drake. If you were to stack either of these guys against Drake, I think it would just be unfair, because Drake just has so many albums, so many mixtapes, that like I think he would just flood all of these categories in different ways, right? So that's a testament to what commitment does and what follow through does, and you know, just putting out good pieces of work. So here it is. This is my list. Obviously J. Cole takes the cake here. So with that being said, maybe there is an argument for him to say that, you know, Kendrick's discography is questionable. So, you know, in my opinion, he may have left himself a little bit open to exposure there, and then maybe a little bit of a rebuttal, but maybe he baited him to kind of take that angle on purpose, just based on how the rest of this lined up. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously the future, you know, everything can change. I mean, depending on what direction this beef goes and what direction, you know, each of these guys go in terms of music and releasing. But yeah, this is where it stands now. So let me know if you agree with this. Thumbs up or hit me in the comments in regards to, you know, if you would have done it differently, or maybe which one of these are more questionable. But I'm happy with where it's at. And shout out to J. Cole for throwing up 3 classic albums already. Can't wait for the fall off. Maybe that'll be the next one. We'll find out. But thanks for tuning in, and hope to see y'all next time. Take care and stay safe, and I'll holler at you on the next video. All right, peace.